Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, May 5th, 2022. Better known to those viewers of Corona beer commercials as Cinco de Mayo. And I guess that means everybody goes out for Mexican food and something today. And I think a couple of years past, we have, I think we may have even tried to straighten out why it is that Americans have come to believe somehow that Cinco de Mayo is Mexican Independence Day. It's not. They have an actual Independence Day. The NAFTA calendar straightens it out for us and tells us that it is the anniversary, Cinco de Mayo, of course, the anniversary of the Battle of Puebla, is that right? And so, important battle against of the Mexican forces' victory against French interlopers back when France, at some point, claimed sovereignty over Mexico. That must have been some exciting and interesting game. Yeah, I mean, I'm aware that they did that. What a difference it would have made, generally speaking. I mean, I don't think they were going to change the fact that Mexico, having been originally colonized by Spain, was going to be a largely Spanish-speaking country. But suppose they had changed it and that France had mandated speaking French there. I wonder whether that would have changed either the way we view French speakers or maybe the way we view them as immigrants, whether their ability to speak French might have changed things, or whether we would simply think that all French-speaking people needed to be targeted and kept out of the country instead. Probably the latter. Just sort of an interesting thought. Anyway, also note that I, in posting the morning post today and noting what was happening on the NAFTA calendar, I prayed and prayed and prayed that today would be recognized as a National Day of Prayer, and my prayers have been answered. There is a God. We have proven it, specifically with evidence from the calendar, so that's good news. I wanted it to be National Day of Prayer, and lo and behold, it did become National Day of Prayer. I'm not certain of the direction of causation in that one, but we'll just take it as proof of evidence of all the things that, whatever you need evidence of, it's available to you today. Why don't you take it and run with it? The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, thanks to our prayers were answered. And I remind you that today is both Cinco de Mayo and National Day of Prayer. That's why I began down that path. This is Bill's tweet. This is my prayer. Bill includes his own. Dear God, please don't let us run out of tacos. So an excellent combination of the two, right? Great job. You can serve nut tacos to the crazy squirrels outside. You know, different assorted mixed nuts as they come in the can, already mixed up. You don't have to mix them yourself, I found out. And put them in a taco shell and see if that works for you. All right, many things to catch up on today. I suppose at this point, everything breaks through on Madison Cawthorn, and we have to at least make some mention of it. It's been a week or two of constant revelation of new scandals in which he's been involved, and it seems pretty clear that it's a coordinated effort. And the big question, I guess, for us is whether or not they are, in fact, targeting him because they're still mad about his cocaine and orgies comment. I guess this means that he was right and there really are a lot of Caucasian and cocaine orgies going on, and they're angry about having been exposed. And that, I guess, has to be it, because there's nothing that separates him from any of the other lunatics who they're not specifically targeting to drum out of Congress. But he's been a particular embarrassment, and his the local Republican establishment in North Carolina agrees that they've been embarrassed by him, and that may or may not be the case in Colorado or Georgia, where we're still living, or Florida for that matter, where we're still living with the other nuts. Arizona, too. Let's throw them in as well. They're not doing anything to replace their craziest lunatics. All right. Well, the last installment on it. I don't think we got around to talking about that he had some financial scandal as well. He was trading in some ridiculous cryptocurrency thing or another, which is dumb enough all by itself. Although you may remember that he was, a while ago, trying to push something about that we ought to be, I don't know what, holding part of our federal monetary reserves in Bitcoin or something like that. Or I don't even remember what he was trying to do with Bitcoin. Anyway, this wasn't even Bitcoin. This was some garbage fake coin that somebody made up. They're all made up, but whatever. Anyway, I didn't read that story yet, and I didn't really even intend to bother. I don't know, whatever. And it just, things kept piling up. And now there's a video out there that all I've seen is on Twitter. Everybody I follow on Twitter says they're not going to retweet the video, so I haven't seen it. And by all reports, that's a good thing because it's explicit and weird and gross because you're dealing with Madison Cawthorn. And apparently, I guess you could say it rivals the Joe Barton photos in terms of the inappropriateness of what's displayed. And apparently, I don't know. So he's out there trying to defend himself. I don't know how long this lasts. Their primary date, I think, is May 17th. And early voting is already underway. So I imagine people are going to the polls, right? Whatever, mailing in their ballots with the current impression of, I guess, I don't know what, the equivalent of the P-tape being released for Madison Cawthorn. He's out there defending himself, saying he was just being young and foolish and crude and inappropriate. But, you know, he's 15 years old. There's not a whole lot of space where we can afford him the indiscretions of youth. He's still a youth. That's the problem. And all of these things that we keep hearing about are from his, from years gone by. That's last week, to the rest of us who are old enough to know better than to videotape themselves doing these ridiculous things. I don't know what to make of it. Story reported, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm pretty sure Greg's probably on the same page with that. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm good. So my friend Adam Bass is a reporter in Massachusetts. You think he's running in North Carolina 11, right? But he's really running in NC 17.
That's pretty good. I like that one.
Yeah.
All right.
Am I right?
I think so. No one will show me this. They're all moralizing. And I think everybody says
it's funny. I was just reading this story about language.
Oh.
Right. Well, things like explicit and graphic have come to mean sex because people are obsessed with sex.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But if you say something's a graphic novel, that doesn't mean it's about sex.
No, but it should be.
It could be. Exciting. You don't know.
Yeah, and some people think it is too. I bet there's a lot of confusion about that over the mouse thing, where there was objections to. Oh my gosh, there's a representation of a naked body in
right.
This
and if you say Justice Alito is pretty explicit about what he thinks, that doesn't mean explicit has anything to do with sex, except this has everything to do with sex. But it doesn't really, not in the way that would be an NC-17 sort of thing.
That's true. We have sort of
the language is weird.
It is. We'd have to explain it to learners of our language. And I could see where they would make a lot of mistakes. I see where
what
English
do you mean by
native
that?
English speakers
what we
would
did
make
mean by
mistakes.
that is quite different than what we mean by it now.
I mean, you're right. It is about sex, but that's not what they meant. Yeah. Okay. Well, everything's about sex. For
Not
Madison
in the way
Cawthorn,
that I know it when I see it.
Yeah. Right. Cawthorn. He was just on the House floor the other day. I don't remember what his comments was. All I remember was that he found occasion to say the word tallywhacker, if that's even a word. I'd hate to have to explain that one to an English learner. I mean, it's easy enough to explain, but why is that used? And the answer is, I don't know. It's really not. Kids say it. I have no idea. But anyway, now we know why he brought up tallywhackers.
Taking on your dealer is the third rail in American politics.
I guess so. Man, he really, whatever. Look, more power to those looking to drive him from office, even if they're crazier than he is. I don't care.
Right. So we got a lot to talk about today. A lot of it is about SCOTUS, and some of it's about Ukraine. Which one you want to do first?
That's not a dirty word, by the way, SCOTUS, as it turns out. Let's just start with them. They're on everybody's mind.
They are.
And then everybody's drawers.
Let me give you some lightning round stuff. I mean, a lot of this is going to be from tweets. When you want to know why reporters and media and people who follow media like me spend so much time on Twitter, this will give you a pretty good idea, because a lot of this stuff isn't written anywhere else. Yeah, but it's a really nice collection of things people think.
Yeah. Usually they follow it up with an article, but this
sometimes
is nice.
Depends who they are.
Yeah. Unless it's about
if you're a professional article writer, you do. And even if you do, sometimes it takes a few days. And even if you do wait a few days, sometimes it's behind a paywall. So you can get it right away on Twitter, and it's kind of cool.
That's why we like it.
Yep. So worth noting, says Ron Brownstein, SCOTUS is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade on the narrowest possible majority vote, with only the GOP justices voting yes. Red states are banning and restricting abortion on party line majority votes, but Congress can't respond because that requires bipartisan Senate supermajority. Right. So it's a reminder that process matters, and it's an uneven playing field. And that's the way the Republicans like it, and they're doing everything they can to keep it that way.
Yes, that's a good point. We handicap ourselves. Everybody's been re-asking that question of Manchin, and now more Sinema, because she professes to be...
actually more Collins and Murkowski.
Oh, yeah? Oh, okay. Interesting.
Because Manchin and Sinema may or may not be gettable, but Collins or Murkowski on this one issue where they have a carve-out, because after all, the Senate can do whatever they want, and they did it for Supreme Court justices with filibusters.
Yes, right.
So they can do whatever they want. I mean, you're the procedure guy,
true.
But there's no law that says they can't.
Right. There's no law that says that there's no law either, so they could make a law that says they can't if they want to.
So Media Matters follows up with that and says you can't explain the status of federal abortion rights legislation without necessarily confronting the fact that the Senate is anti-majoritarian. And we'll get to how anti-majoritarian in just a few minutes. But the Beltway press doesn't want to talk about that or the broad support for Roe.
Yeah.
And there really is broad support for Roe. So they weasel out of it by saying it's controversial or it's a divided country. Yeah, it's divided 70-30, or depending upon how you ask the question, 90-10.
Yes. All right. That's true. It's divided. It's just not closely divided.
Yeah, a pie is divided when you take a piece, but it could be a small sliver and it's still a divided pie.
Right. Even a united country is divisible by one.
Right. Zach Cohen, who was a congressional reporter, notes something interesting. Democrats raised $12 million in the day after news broke about a draft Supreme Court opinion, according to Act Blue.
Oh, okay.
All right. Now, Oliver Willis notes separately, I personally find the mechanics of Supreme Court leaking boring as drying paint, except that's not what he said.
Oh, okay. Right.
Boring!
Right.
It doesn't interest me in the least, other than how Republicans are hyping it up to deflect from the Republican abortion ban. And I would point out, for those reporters who are obsessed with the leak, and I think we had an interesting discussion about the leak yesterday.
Yes. Not boring to me.
But there are parts that are not boring. The part we talked about yesterday, in fact, making the case maybe it was a conservative who leaked. And this piece from U.S. News saying Gorsuch went to the Federalist Society in February to brief them on what was going to happen.
Oh, leaky leaker.
Leaky leaker, right? But the
leaks.
point is, and my point is, and Oliver's point is, and I'm just putting a period on that point, okay, is you didn't raise $12 million because people were worried about the process of leaking.
That's true. That's right. It was only $6 million raised on that from people gasping.
No, only an $11.5 million. No, they raised it because of what the draft opinion said and its implications, and therefore that is the story.
Yes.
Now, if you want to write another story about how Gorsuch, in a media barred from Justice Gorsuch, talked to Federalist Society story, sure, fine. You could do that. And you're supposed to write about stuff everybody else isn't writing about. But if you're going to make broad brush conclusions, stop weaseling out of the fact that we have an anti-majority Senate and that the draft opinion is the story. And don't make it a Chuck Todd both sides. Well, Washington is obsessed by the leak. Screw Washington. The country is obsessed by the goddamn opinion.
That's the reality of it. And of course, you may find in the end that the leaker is exactly the opposite of who you thought the leaker was. And
maybe. And then you'll have a story. Till then, you don't.
Okay. Right. Although, interestingly, if it turns out that the leaker was a conservative, then suddenly it won't be a story, which is amazing. Because that's exactly when it would be a story.
Now,
to me.
Let's follow up on some things people said that were exactly what we said the other day.
Oh.
Except we said it first.
Oh, yeah.
On yesterday's show.
Nice. All right.
Okay, Maharaju says, Senator John Tester said the justices were being dishonest when they testified in respecting precedent over Roe. I don't think they were being honest, Tester said. Well, that's the same thing as saying they're lying. He's just being nice about it.
Yeah, we don't know.
But they're lying liars.
Right.
Right? They lied to Collins. They lied to Murkowski. They lied to Tester. And you can, and I saw this all day on Twitter. Well, Collins and Murkowski were naive to believe. He lied to everybody.
Yes.
Gorsuch did.
They were all naive.
Kavanaugh did. But I don't know about Barrett. Barrett may have been very straightforward.
I will kill it all. Yeah,
most
maybe.
of them said they were going to go with past precedent, and that simply wasn't the case. Tester added, it's probably the first time in my lifetime we've taken away rights from people. Democrats, there's your line to run on.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Mark Joseph Stern notes, here's Louisiana new fetal personhood bill, which House Republicans just voted out of committee 7-2. I don't usually comment on things that are proposed in committee because some of them are so stupid they don't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And David could give you a master class on the many ways you could bottle something up in committee if you really don't want it because leadership likes it but doesn't really like it. They want to pretend to like it, but they don't want to vote no. And so there's like a gazillion ways you can delay it. But this came out of committee, voted out of committee 7-2, making abortion a crime of homicide from the moment of fertilization and allowing prosecutors to charge patients with murder and probably doctors too. Mm-hmm. Okay. And Amy Fried, political scientist, retweets this with the comment, but the NRSC, that's the National Senate Committee, Committee to Re-elect Senators, right?
Republican senator, yes. Right.
Talking points discussed by Axios, which I sent you the other day, you see, had them all, said it was a dastardly Democratic lie that Republicans would criminalize abortion. That was one of the talking points.
Very dastardly.
Except for when they do. And Megan McArdle, who is just being a complete jerk about this, said, look, I'm pro-choice, but you got to let Roe go, she wrote in 2018. And yesterday was writing, I don't know why people are getting so worked up about this. It's not like they're going to come for Griswold or anything else. And even if they did, Griswold being it's illegal for couples to use contraception law from Connecticut back in the day. So she's saying, they're not going to overturn that and make contraception illegal or make same-sex marriage. They're not going to do any of those things. I mean, what legislative body, if they send it back to the states, would actually go along with that? What Louisiana's doing. They're going to criminalize doctors, and they're going to criminalize women who seek abortion. And even if the way out of this mess is to focus on over-the-counter or with prescription pills that you could take and get sent by mail from some other state, and that's really where abortion is going because half of abortions are done that way anyway, then, if Louisiana is doing that and it's going to take every step, why in your right mind would you not think that, oh, yeah, they'll go there? Of course they'll go there.
Yes, well, she's just got you've explained it before. Her paycheck depends on pretending that the political agenda is something other than what it is.
Right, because otherwise my positions wouldn't be reasonable.
Right.
And I'm a reasonable person, so I must be right. And even when I said in 2018, probably a good idea to let Roe go, and now we're seeing the backlash from it, I have to defend that position because I'm a pundit and I don't make mistakes.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what she's lying about what's happening so that she looks like she knows what's going on.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, here's the Plum Line writing. An upset win over the Enjoy Rape MAGA candidate speaks volumes, he writes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hate won't win. That hashtag went viral last month after Mallory McMorrow, an obscure Democratic state senator from Michigan, delivered a blistering takedown of a GOP colleague who'd falsely labeled her a groomer.
Yes.
The moment drew national media attention and galvanized Democrats who have hungered for a more forceful response to right-wing culture war degeneracy. And here he's, putting his finger on a point. You can't ignore the culture wars.
Okay.
You can't ignore them. You can't say,
not.
okay, well, but I'm going to do Infrastructure Week.
Yes, right.
Jobs.
You can try. You
No,
can do
that's
that.
not gonna
it's not a
work.
good idea, but you can.
Okay.
They just did. But
now another version of the hate won't win message has scored an upset in an unlikely place, an area of Michigan that twice voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. And though the circumstances in this race were unique, the win also hints at ways for Democrats to calibrate their response to GOP culture warring going forward. Carol Glanville defeated her Republican opponent in a special election Tuesday for a Michigan State House seat. Glanville won by 11 points, even though the district has been represented by Republicans for decades.
yes.
Of course, Republican Robert Reagan was an exceptionally damaged candidate. We talked about him yesterday.
Yep.
He's the lie back and enjoy it if rape is inevitable guy.
One of several.
Right? And it's possible Reagan would have won if he hadn't made this hideous statement, but the swing in the district was nonetheless unexpectedly large, and what's interesting about the race is how the Democrats ran it. Glanville adopted an approach to politics similar to that of McMorrow. His right-wing extremism went far beyond rape comments and included suggestions coronavirus was the Russian invasion of Ukraine were both hoaxes. And what Glanville told Greg Sargent, we show that Republican extremism has no home in Michigan. And that's the point. You got to run against Republicans because they are extremists. I don't mean labeling them as extremists. I mean calling them out for what they are, extremists.
Yes.
Plenty of examples, Louisiana and otherwise.
Right.
You want to criminalize women who get abortions, even in other states, and the doctors who are trying to save the life of the mother. You're trying to criminalize that. And don't tell me you're not. You are. Here's the bill.
Yes. I mean, they'll lie and say, you don't understand the mumbo jumbo, but we do. And by the way, that criminalization bill, it's very similar to ones under consideration in several other states. And as other people have pointed out, it would also likely ensnare doctors who perform in vitro fertilization procedures, fertility clinics, etc., because of the way that they produce the embryos.
Not just produce them. What about throwing out the ones you don't use?
Well, that's. I guess it's not because of the way they produce
every sperm is sacred,
so much as yes.
Monty Python had it right.
Right. Well, right. And if personhood begins at conception, then frozen embryos are people, and if you don't use them and you end up disposing of them, then you're guilty of murder, and that's what those bills encompass. So all the people who, this is just one of those. Another example of, oh my goodness, they're hypocrites. Yes, that's true. They know that. They don't care. Don't worry about it. You can't bother them with it. But it is worth pointing out to other people who might be, say, interested in having children and think that they're not part of the abortion debate. And it turns out that the doctors that can help them are all in jail. Sorry, because of how pro-life you were.
Well, again, you hit on the basic point there. Calling them extremists isn't because you're going to change a guy like Reagan's mind, or Todd Akins,
right,
or Marjorie Taylor Greene, Margie Three Names, or whatever. It's the people who may vote for them that are neither Republican nor Democrat, who are independents, who are a very large faction of American voters who don't really have clear ideas on what they want. All you have to do is ask them, and they're all over the place. And those folks are gettable. And they don't like extremists.
Let's get them.
And they don't like thinking of themselves as extremists.
I guess they like it in Ohio, though.
Well, if you don't give them a reason to vote, and the other side gives a reason for their side to vote, then you'll win in a low turnout election. That's what happened in Ohio. It's really interesting. J.D. Vance won because Trump said vote for him, but he only got a third of the vote. 2/3 didn't vote for him.
Right.
And, you want to call 33% a win, fine. Seth Maskett, the political scientist, makes the point that it's a win because once your party nominates you, they all line up behind you. But I'm not so sure they will with Vance. They don't like him.
Well, we'll see. I guess he'll do well in the 9th district, where apparently one of the other results of the night in Ohio was the Republicans nominating for Congress an outspoken QAnon nut, except that he now says, "Oh, I never heard of QAnon," but there's, of course, tons of videos of him wearing Q T-shirts and saying how much he loves Q.
I like Q-tips.
Other than that, yeah, sure. Another
I clean my ears with them.
J.R. Majewski.
You can't tell me now. Yeah, it's America. I can clear my ear. You can't tell me I can't.
That's true.
Keep warning me not to put them in my ear, but I want to, and so I'm wearing this Q shirt.
Right. If you go this far, you might as well just keep going with the Q-tips. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit it with a hammer.
Brain biopsy for all I care, and it'll be hard to do because you'll have a hard time finding it. But
most likely you'll miss.
Here's another piece. Oh, isn't Ohio the home of Mean Gene Schmidt?
Yes. Is it? Yes. I hope so. I think so. Yeah. She's in the state legislature.
Yeah, still writing nonsense laws that now have a chance to actually get enacted. So, Megan McArdle, no. This is a piece from Robert P. Jones, PRRI, the polling firm that looks at religion. Alito and public opinion revealed the link between Roe and a broader white Christian nationalist agenda, which I think is important. The heart of Alito's argument is striking, he writes. That's because the Constitution is silent on the specific issue of abortion. No support for it can be found there. This highly restrictive interpretation intentionally mounts a full frontal assault on a long-standing body of jurisprudence based on an implied right to privacy in the Constitution. Speaking of an implied right to privacy in the Constitution,
yes,
unless I'm mistaken, you know what else is implied but not actually mentioned in the Constitution?
A lot of things, but what?
Women.
Yes, well,
I don't think that word appears.
No, it doesn't, and I think they made that...
Well, women are in the Constitution, so therefore they're not really legal entities.
Yeah, so there, ladies... now this gets me out of shopping for gifts for Mother's Day. This is fantastic. I should become a conservative. All right. Well, that's true. Made famous in the movies, too.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, I'll do a little bit more on this, and then we'll...
All right. Well, we're here and live and ready to do it again. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Let's do a little more on this. What was it?
Robert P. Jones, as big as the impact of this potential ruling is for the issue of abortion, the shockwaves will extend far beyond that. As it stands, it would provide a basis for dismantling nearly 6 decades of jurisprudence going back to the 1965 case Griswold v. Connecticut.
Yeah,
our friend Amana said nobody knows who Griswold is. Everybody in Connecticut knows who Griswold is.
Clark Griswold.
It's Connecticut. It's the Connecticut part.
The Connecticut
which secured the right of a married couple to use contraception.
Congratulations.
I mean, that's like saying nobody cares about women's basketball. Oh, you kidding? This is Connecticut. Shut up.
Okay. Right. So they care about contraception and basketball. Women's
That's
basketball.
about it. Right. The current ruling,
Regular
should
basketball.
It proceed in its present form, will set up future challenges to a range of other rights such as same-sex marriage, birth control, and even interracial marriage. In short, Alito's opinion, which looks likely to become the majority opinion of the U.S. Supreme Court, is the legal equivalent of a time machine that threatens to transport us back to the 1950s. And then he goes on to look at his own polling about abortion attitudes by state and support for legality of abortion by state.
Yes.
And one of the important points, only 36% of all Republicans believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases.
Okay.
With independents, it's 66%, Democrats 87%.
Yeah.
Right. So talk about being president of all these United States, not them.
Oh.
Everything they do is for the constituency only, which gets them riled up, which is why they come out to vote, which is why pandering to the base works, at least for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And also, he points out there's a big connection between opposition to abortion and the broader white Christian nationalist agenda.
Yes, right.
Denial of systemic racism, for example, nostalgia for the 50s. In PRRI's latest March 22 polling, you can clearly see the links between attitudes on abortion and a range of cultural issues. 69% believe abortion should be illegal in all or most cases for white evangelical Protestants. 59% oppose same-sex marriage. 70% disagree past discrimination impacts outcomes today. 68% believe being a Christian is important for being American. 69% believe American culture and way of life have changed for the worse since the 1950s. So he's not making this stuff up when he says it.
Yeah.
Well, right. Laura Bassett has a really, really nice piece on in leaked abortion decision. Justice Alito relies on a jurist who supported marital rape and executed witches. That would be Sir Matthew Hale, 17th century Brit who dehumanized women. So that's his standard for, good jurisprudence.
Yeah, by the way, international law. Remember when that was an outrage?
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to martial law, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L.
Right.
Now, this is from YouGov from May 3rd of this year.
YouGov. Okay.
Okay. And you see a lot of misinterpretation and smoke blowing and hiding behind mirrors when people say, well, abortion is really unpopular in this country. That's because if you ask the question in terms of do you feel that there should be some restrictions, the answer is inevitably yes. What about this restriction? Well, I like that restriction. What about that restriction? What about for you personally? You can get a whole bunch of reasons that make it a 50-50 country. But if you ask straight up, should you get rid of Roe v. Wade, it's more like 70-30. And in this particular case, YouGov asked the questions, a pregnant woman should never be able to obtain a legal abortion. Agree or disagree? A pregnant woman should never be able to obtain a legal abortion.
Right.
90% of the public disagree with that as of 2 days ago.
Well, 90% of you are
divided
wrong.
Country.
Sorry.
Only 5% agree. That's who Alito's pandering to.
Well, he's
which is why everybody's so upset. That's how they raised $12 million in a day.
All right.
All right. Here's another one from Larry Sabato. Big change. Americans want term limits for Supreme Court justices, 66 to 21, and favor expanding the court by 55 to 36. New Morning Consult poll. Mm-hmm. And he says, when I tested public appetite for court reforms in 2007, the resistance was great.
Okay.
Right. So when this, I don't want to change the Supreme. It's ridiculous. Why would you want to say, well, they just did this. Holy cow, they did that? Okay, I want to change it.
Yeah. Not too surprising, but
public opinion is set in stone, except when it's not.
Right. Although, the term limits number is fairly surprising and fairly significant. A 55-45 split on what was the second question? I can't recall what the basis of that question was, but now that one's that it's a majority, but you're not going to get anywhere with 55%. What were we talking about? It was term limits, and then the second question was
for Larry Sabato.
Yeah, right.
After I already unclicked it, I have to go look that one back up.
Move on. I'll find it.
But I will.
Okay.
Term limits for Supreme Court justices 66 to 21, expanding the court 55-36.
Yes. Right.
So there's more support for term limits than expansion.
By far. So, 55, 55% support in the Senate is a loss, of course. But
right.
All right.
Now, something we were talking about yesterday, and there's actually evidence for.
Oh.
Laura Barron Lopez writes, Biden warned draft Roe opinion threatened abortion, but also contraception, marriage, and privacy. It's a strategy he crafted 35 years ago during the Bork nomination.
Bork. Yes.
His sister Valerie helped to him. It rests on the Ninth Amendment and linked to Griswold. Valerie. So nobody knows who Griswold is. Well, a lot of people do know who Griswold is, Clark Griswold, but they know what Griswold is. And if they don't know the name Griswold, they do know the concept. And for those who don't, they're about to know. And the fact is, it was a successful rejection of Bork. Successful because people voted to reject them.
Yes.
All right. And it was a key thing. According to this Washington Post piece here, Bork believed that if the framers didn't spell out a particular right explicitly, it wasn't essential. That it threatened civil rights, reproductive rights, and the right to privacy. And Biden, Owens recalled in her memoir, Growing Up Biden, released earlier this year. Oh. That's his sister, Valerie Biden Owens. So, that was a big deal. And Joe Biden wanted to demonstrate to the American public how Bork's narrow reading of the Constitution might affect their lives.
That seems like a good idea to do at a guy's confirmation hearing.
Right. Relying on his sister for the women's issues. It's not a bad thing. We brought up Bork, and I said that Alito's opinion is right out of Bork, and you know what? It is.
Yes. Well, as we were explaining yesterday, there's entire law schools and organizations dedicated to teaching that, even though that has been wrong up until now. And as we've explained on the show a number of times, their whole effort, their whole theory rests on if enough people decide, or the right people decide that wrong is now right, everybody who learned the law backwards the whole time and didn't know it will have to wake up and realize that, we've been considering things incorrectly the whole time. The thing we made up back in the 80s is actually the founders' intent.
Mm. And last on this topic, we could do 3 hours on it easy, but I do want to move on to Ukraine.
All right.
Paul Kogan writes on Twitter, legendary clothing company Levi Strauss announces it will reimburse travel expenses for employees who need to travel to other states for abortion services in the wake of the Republican Party repealing Roe v. Wade. They should also talk to their pharmacy benefit managers and make sure that the morning after pill is covered.
Okay. Is it Levi?
That's cheaper than reimbursing travel expenses.
Okay. So good. Save money too.
Capitalism,
Yeah. Levi Strauss. I wonder. I never really gave much thought to how many employees does Levi Strauss have and where are they located?
Tip of the iceberg, canary in the coal mine, and all of that. So they won't be the last.
Right.
They're probably not the first, and they won't be the last.
Okay. Canary in the gold mine because of Levi Strauss's corporate history. But I don't know. Do they put canaries in gold mines, or do they just like who cares?
Goldmine Sachs if
I don't care whether we might die, but I might get gold. Like for coal, I want to know if I'm going to die. For gold, I'll just hold my breath.
Right. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about Ukraine, where the war continues not to go well for Russia, and not only does it not going well for Russia,
gentle, yes.
But today, as you pointed out, is May the 5th. We skipped over May the 4th yesterday.
We sort of did it.
Maybe you'll have a new tradition of talking, because the Congress says every day is something. It could be National Donut Day or National Video Game Day.
I just go by the NAFTA calendar, generally.
Yeah. But
May the 4th, yes.
May 9th is coming. That's, if you want to think about it in U.S. terms, that's Sunday night.
Okay.
By Sunday night in the U.S., it'll be May 9th in Moscow. And May 9th is Victory Day.
Right, declare victory.
Victory over the Nazis. And Putin wanted to declare victory by Sunday night in Ukraine, and guess what? It ain't happening.
Not really, anyway. I'm still waiting to see whether they decide to say it happened.
Well, there's a lot about that. So this is from Dmitry Alperovich, who writes, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a prediction that Putin will not do a full mobilization call on May 9th or any time in the near future. I could be wrong, and I don't have as much confidence in this as I did when I said on December 21st that Kremlin was going to invade Ukraine. But here's why I think a mobilization call makes little sense for Putin. One, Putin doesn't need to continue major offensives to declare victory.
Okay.
He can claim he's demilitarized Ukraine, denazified it, because Mariupol means he destroyed the Azov battalion and they are the Nazis. He could say that. That's not really true. Like all the Nazis in the Azov battalion had been replaced over the past 3 or 4 years as Ukraine reformed the military. A lot of people don't know that. What it used to be and what it is now are completely different things.
Oh, well, that's good. You mean they got replaced?
Yeah.
Poor Nazis.
Yeah.
They were very upset about that in this country.
And Russia invaded them because of it.
Well.
Anyway, protected our people in Donbass and Crimea by enlarging territory and creating a land corridor. He could say that, even if it's not true.
All right.
With full control of Russian domestic propagandist media, selling a win to domestic audience would be a piece of cake for Putin. And the truth never needs to stand in the way of a good story the pliable Russian public would be happy to consume. And a lot more about that. Putin declaring victory doesn't mean Russian forces would leave or stop fighting. He's declared victory in Syria, but they're still there fighting.
Oh, all right.
But he could end
Makes
major
sense.
offensive operations, which he can't sustain past the fight for the Donbass anyway, and switch to defensive tactics to protect the gains.
Yes.
Right? Maybe they can't defend Kherson, but if the Russians abandon it, cross the river, blow the bridges, they could make it really tough for Ukrainians to retake the rest of the Donetsk to Crimea. And he could continue to terrorize Ukrainian cities at will. So he could do all of those things, but declaring full mobilization is very fraught politically for Putin. And I'll go into some other reasons besides the ones he's going to present. As Michael Kaufman points out, declaring mobilization also means enlarging current limited war aims and risking suffering a devastating loss you wouldn't be able to explain away. Declaring mobilization just to help retake Donbass makes no sense from risk versus benefit and is admission of defeat. So if Putin declares mobilization, it would be to have another go at Kyiv or Odessa, but he'd be foolish to do that and foolish to think that Shoigu, who is his defense minister, the Lloyd Austin equivalent, or Gerasimov, who is the injured general, who is the Mike Milley
Joint Chiefs
equivalent,
guy,
could succeed where they had already failed once. More untrained manpower doesn't solve bad tactics, logistics, and training. In fact, it makes it all worse, all things that had doomed Russians' first assault on Kyiv. And mobilization would take many months, so the current offensive, if it fails, would stall regardless. And Putin's now seen how difficult it is to control occupied areas without significant organized resistance, and how challenging it is to take cities that do resist, like Mariupol. And he'd be stuck rebuilding if he claims this area.
If he wants to.
So he's surely lost faith by now in what the FSB, the follow-up to the KGB, has been telling him about Russian agents in Ukraine that could quickly run the occupied country. So even if he were somehow to take Kyiv, establishing a puppet government would be near impossible. And the Russian public currently supports the fake version of the war they're seeing on TV. Most families don't know anyone who's fighting and dying yet, because many soldiers are from poor villages and ethnic minorities. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Right? You take people from these really poor villages, stick them in Ukraine, which seems like rich and paved with gold compared to where they're from. And they get really angry and steal all the goods and send it home.
So it's economic anxiety.
Yeah, a huge mobilization would change all that, and it's very risky. Putin's gambled big on this war, but so far he's not gambled his hold on power, which means quite secure. Now, he could try to force concessions on Zelensky, but if Putin keeps Ukraine from taking back most of occupied territory and strangles Ukraine's export-driven economy with a blockade, he might believe he could get them, but that doesn't mean that he can't. And so that's why I don't think it's likely Putin declares full mobilization this weekend and Monday and next week. But he could easily call for more patriotic volunteers. That I don't rule out. It won't make a substantial difference. And if I am proven wrong in this call, it'll be most likely because Putin has been completely isolated from reality and has no idea what's truly happening in this war since nobody's telling him the truth. And that's impossible to know. So that's a great pundit add-on I should really add. Note, if I'm wrong, it's because whoever decided different than what I said they were going to do is completely nuts.
I guess. I don't know. I had this nagging feeling all the way through it, and then that mention of the if I'm wrong thing really makes me want to say it now.
But I'm good at this, and I wasn't wrong about when I said they were going to invade back in December.
That's true, and he was very happy to say that, and I don't know. I'll take his word for it that he actually did that. Probably. It sounds pretty provable. I doubt he'd hang that out there without being on the record.
No, he's on the record. There's a tweet from that date.
This idea of, now my new prediction is that Putin won't declare full mobilization.
I got an even more in-depth analysis of that.
Oh, okay. I don't remember anybody saying that May 9th had anything to do with declaring mobilization. It was declaring victory.
I've seen it online quite a bit. That, because he had committed himself to declaring victory, and there's no victory, he has to explain what and how and why.
I see. Okay, so all right, that seems like a new twist.
It's Victory Day.
I guess.
Where's the victory?
Right. But
what's he going to do? Is he going to parade tanks that have no turrets?
Yes. I would. I mean,
because they're all in Ukraine,
right? I guess I don't know. To me, like, okay, well, I'll predict that he's not going to call for a full mobilization on May 9th. Well, okay, but I mean, I'll predict he doesn't go bowling on May 9th.
Right.
That wasn't on the agenda.
Right.
I mean, am I a pundit if he doesn't bowl? And if he does bowl, it's because he's crazy.
That Putin will not overturn the filibuster in the Senate.
Right, exactly.
And I'm going to be right about that. I could be wrong, but
if you are, it's only because of how crazy people are.
Yeah, in the Senate.
I don't know. That seems like a weird thing. But okay, so but we probably should have been alerted to the possibility of them wanting to mobilize to complete this invasion, and they won't because it wouldn't help them and they'd lose anyway, I guess.
So here's the thing.
Yes.
May 9th, the Victory Day. This is a completely different author, Camille Galiv. Again, following this, because this has come up a lot. May 9th, the Victory Day, is a crucial symbolic date. We should expect the victory parade in Putin's speech to the nation on that day. So what's he going to say?
Yes.
Many are pondering whether he will, 1, declare war on Ukraine, 2, declare mass mobilization in Russia. So let's discuss both. Let's start with the question, and this is very long. We're not going to do it all, but it has some fascinating nuggets and insights here.
All right.
Let's start with the question, why Putin didn't declare the war on Ukraine yet? Well, probably because he didn't expect any serious resistance.
All right.
Right? He thought it was going to be Czechoslovakia, and it wasn't.
It's like going into Wisconsin.
So, planning for another pacification of an East European satellite state, Moscow unexpectedly got into a major war it didn't prepare for, and they didn't prepare for a war, so they didn't declare a war or martial law, and that has major consequences. Now, he makes an interesting point here and gives documents, which I can't read, of course, because they're Russian, and even if I could, I'm not a lawyer. But he says, Russian state policies may not be legal, but they're absolutely procedural. It's a machine acting according to an algorithm. And more specifically, the war and martial law are regulated by an algorithm described in this particular document. It hasn't been activated. And as the martial law algorithm was not activated, procedurally speaking, Russia's now at peace.
Okay.
Thus, all the peacetime procedures are still valid. In practical terms, it means the Army, the National Guard, and other contractors can leave.
Oh, see ya.
Right? And we have a complaint about that from our friend the Pickle, Gherkin.
Oh.
See Strokov's lament. I have information that many Russian military units, many contractors, are leaving.
I would.
He's upset about that because he wants total annihilation of Ukraine.
Right, of course.
Many either leave their jobs or refuse to go to war, and he gives examples of intercepted discussions with Russian leaders, that is to say battle group leaders, National Guard leaders, pleading with their members to stay. And so what happens is, like in the Battle of Kyiv, and we've talked about this on the show, the Russians go to Kyiv, they get their asses handed to them, so they withdraw maybe to north into to Belarus.
Yeah, to the north.
And then go to the east and then come back down to get re-involved in the battle for the Donbass. And they've been chewed up, and they're in no shape to fight. So you get thrown back into that battle, and they leave.
Go to
They're
Belarus.
not interested in fighting. They just got clobbered.
Party in Minsk, if you want. I don't know.
Right. Some commanders try to destroy the record of the military who quit, putting special notes or stamps into the military ID, but that only matters if you work for the state. The troops already departed to war and were later returned, refused to go again. For example, and this is the VDV, that's their airborne elite. That's like the Army Rangers.
Oh, okay.
After the VDV were massacred in Ukraine, about 100 airborne from Peskov who were returned home from Belarus refused to go to the war again. In practical terms, that means the ability of Russia to regroup, withdraw forces from the north in order to send everybody to Donbass was probably exaggerated. Well, not by us because we talked about it. Many of those who already been to Ukraine and were returned to Russia, they won't go again. And they can refuse because it's peacetime and they're contractors.
I guess. I mean, if you guys think you can lean on legal precedent, like it says right here in this paper, Mr. Putin, that I fell
See,
out
but the
window.
point there is that you have to change things. You can change the law.
I guess.
You could say, but then that's the same thing as declaring martial law or changing the whole process, which Putin doesn't want to do because then he'd have to admit he's losing.
Right. I mean,
that's the bind he finds himself in, and that's why there's so few off-ramps for him.
I guess so. I mean, clearly he's in trouble, and clearly even doing things without changing the law and the procedure will lead people to conclude that he's doing these things. But I mean, I guess in Russia you could say, well, if you change the law, people will revolt against it. And if you don't change the law, but you just force people to go, then you're breaking the law.
In this very long piece, he's got a lot about how things like that works, and basically makes the point that there's Putin, and then there's the Russian people and Russian voices who don't really have agency. So when Western media covers the opposition, they're usually talking about people from Moscow who they can, get to.
Yeah.
And they almost exclusively give word to such figures as Navalny and others who are liberals, but really nationalists, and even more nationalists than Putin in some cases. And they never talk to anybody who's like outside of Moscow. So they have no idea what Russian voices really think. All right. But that's important for the reason that what you're doing is, if you, and think about this concept, in the Soviet Union, they had a extremely expensive infrastructure which has since been dismantled for building an army. Okay. They would have the conscript side where you come in, you get a gun, you're taught how to use it, you're sent to the Russian front, the Eastern Front.
Okay, right. Sounds normal.
Used to call it, right? And then separately for officers. And they would train officers separately. And there's this one anecdote that this fellow who's describing it says, how do you know an officer from a military enlisted soldier? Well, you asked them to spell really difficult Russian words, and the ones who got it right went to the officer's side, and the ones who didn't went to the soldier's side.
Okay.
And the conscripts weren't all that well trained, but there was a structure to do that. That structure has been dismantled. And it's been dismantled since the fall of the Soviet Union. So even if you were to go ahead, his point is that you were going to go for full mobilization, and you start taking draftees and conscripts and handing them 1950s guns because that's all you have left. But even if it were, better than that, nonetheless, you have a bunch of people who you now do not have the infrastructure to train. And if you take those people and just throw them into Ukraine, they're all going to get slaughtered. And then the officer part is difficult because the doctrine for the Russians is officers tell you what to do and you do it. And there's no such thing as free will and initiative. Very few, if any, NCOs. They don't have that kind of structure in their armed forces. So the generals have to be close to the front lines, which we know because they're getting picked off. And as a matter of fact, there was a story in the New York Times saying, confirming that the U.S. military is what I like to call Occam's drone. The U.S. military is giving information to the Ukrainians about where the generals are.
Yes, they said
that's how come they keep getting picked off.
So that's what Zelensky said. America, if you're listening, maybe you can find the 33,000 Russian generals.
Exactly. So the point is that the infrastructure for training the officers is one thing.
It's infrastructure week.
And it's not working because they're getting picked off. And the infrastructure for training the conscripts is something else, very weak, sort of non-existent. And you can find people to put into the army, but that doesn't mean you can train them and make them an effective fighting force.
Yeah.
And so the idea that mobilization will be the answer to how to deal with Ukraine ain't happening. And then further, he makes one more point, and this is more of a historical point. Back in 1917, there was a revolution.
True, I remember it.
The major and underrated factor in the 1917 revolution in Russia were people with guns, more specifically the garrison of St. Petersburg and the Baltic Navy. The people would have no chance to overthrow the Tsar unless the Tsar, 1, mobilized them, 2, brought them to the capital, 3, trained them to gave them guns, and 4, made sure they had an immediate self-interest in his overthrow, because otherwise they're going to World War I and get massacred. And guess what happened?
They preferred to stay home.
Revolution!
Yeah, all right.
Putin's no idiot. He knows that. So the idea of mobilizing everybody and giving them guns is quite a different kind of, I don't want to go to Ukraine and you're the guy sending me, I think I'll do something about it situation that doesn't exist right now. He would create it if he mobilized everybody and gave them guns and trained them.
Yeah, he'll have to send all the guns elsewhere, like either to Ukraine or Belarus, and say, you're recruited, go pick up your gun, but do it over there. And
well,
then
he certainly
build a
doesn't want
wall.
it in Moscow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a whole lot of different cross currents going on. The whole point is, of all of that long treatise, is simply to say, it's not so easy to raise an army.
Right.
You can't just say, okay, shave your head, here's your gun, I'm ready. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Not if
and so the idea that on May 9th, Putin's going to declare this, well, good luck, because, like, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to declare it. Not my job. Okay, well... man. All right, well, there's a lot to think about. I had not given any thought to his using May 9th to declare a general mobilization, but now I understand why he might think he has to and the political cross currents about why he wouldn't. Okay, well, I don't know.
Well, we'll find out soon enough. It's Thursday,
or no?
So Monday's coming up.
Oh, I guess that's it, huh? Is that May 9th?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's why Sunday night is May 9th in Moscow, so...
Right, okay.
Just in a couple of days, we're going to find out what's going on.
Yes, right.
And you thought I didn't have enough material for this show.
I don't think that ever. But okay. However, we're out of week for you to present it. So, all right. Well, we'll be back on Monday, and at that point, it will
maybe things will calm down. Who knows?
May 9th for 12 hours or so for the Russians. At that point, we'll know whether they're going to have a parade anyway. Okay.
Yeah, without tank turrets.
Right. Okay.
Because they were all in Ukraine.
Well, they got to have that way. It makes it easier to wave at the crowd. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, so much else to cover here as well. Keeping an eye on Russia to see what they do with this thing, and there were lots of opportunities to lead in with the old Yakov Smirnov joke setup line of in Soviet Union, since we were talking way back when. All right, very interesting. Let's see other things to bring us up to speed on. Did I mention yesterday? I can't recall, but Greg shared something with me after his segment yesterday, which I don't think we got into, but I think that, well, let's see. I'm going to look back in archives, because I mentioned part of the story, which was, part of the story, which was that Michelle Bachmann has COVID. When I was just sort of going over the COVID story of the day. And I had mentioned that we were dancing on the edge of triple digits of daily new reports of new cases here in Loudoun County, and we had our 14% day-to-day increase, and we're now into the triple digits. But there was also information that exactly what you thought was going to happen with the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., that is to say that it would become something of a super spreader event, has also happened. And I think Greg sent me a story about that after he finished his segment yesterday, and I don't think I got to it, but because I had mentioned Michelle Bachmann, I included it in the roundup yesterday. But now there's, I guess, a little bit more information on it. I happened to grab a tweet from Eric Feigelding, who frequently is commenting on the COVID subject. And when was this from? Yesterday afternoon, he was tweeting breaking. It was breaking then in the afternoon. That in addition to finding out that several members of the press corps who were at the event, both attending it and covering it, have tested positive. So all the major news outlets report that they have positive cases among their people who attended the event. There's more news now, of course, infecting the rest of the targeted folks from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You're bringing together the media, the news media folks, and the people they cover. So the news media folks got the COVID, and now all the people that they cover are likewise reporting that they have the COVID. The breaking news from Eric here. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just tested positive for COVID-19. That would have been yesterday afternoon. He's still positive, I'm sure, today, but that's when it was breaking news. He recently attended, of course, the White House Correspondents' Association dinner event with 2,600 plus people, where reporters from many media outlets have also now tested positive. This, what does he have here? VF, Vanity Fair, I guess. Headline was on point, calling it the nation's most distinguished super spreader event. The White House Correspondents' Dinner returns. They were joking ahead of time, I guess. And now it says here, what is this? Joe Biden and Trevor Noah took comedic shots at journos and politicos as Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson socialized with Antony Blinken? Question mark. There wasn't a question about whether or not it was Antony Blinken or Antony Blinken, but I guess the question mark was, why were Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson socializing with them? And that's because, I don't know, they just throw different kinds of famous people together, and then they think that's funny when they socialize. So now it means, Antony Blinken has got it, so I guess now it's time for Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson to check to see whether they have it. I don't know how you can tell what else is in Pete Davidson's blood, but you could ask and see whether the tests can pick it up. I mean, I think his test strip just turns purple, and there's 15 lines in it, and I don't know what else is in this guy's, I guess in his mucus, but bleh. If you thought you were going to get your stomach turned by Madison Cawthorn weird sex tapes, then the Pete Davidson mucus story will probably do it for you. All right. So, I don't know. I mean, do we care about the rest of it? I guess so. Maybe because we'll be able to call out some names that we can recognize. Eric Feigelding, again, goes on with the rest of his thread here. We epidemiologists and aerosol scientists have warned about the poor ventilation and high density being a bad setup for almost guaranteed transmission at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. If anyone in the audience had subclinical, that is to say undetected virus. I like the word, subclinical. And indeed, the super spreading event has happened. Here he's pointing to one of his own previous tweets about it. Jonathan Karl tested positive on Monday after attending the dinner, sitting next to Kim Kardashian and talking one-on-one with Biden at the dinner. Yes, that dinner we epidemiologists warned all about. So, 2 reasons now for Kim Kardashian to check, and I guess Pete Davidson as well. They were socializing with Blinken, and Blinken's got it. And they were sitting next to Jonathan Karl, and Jonathan Karl's got it. So, what do you know? And what else? Right, so here's video of, I guess, Trevor Noah delivering that line, the nation's most distinguished super spreader event. Ha ha! Except true. And I don't know, are there any other names in this? I care about the names. But no, he's doing the science thing. This is interesting. He's got a picture of somebody with a carbon dioxide monitor at the event, taking a picture of it, saying that the carbon dioxide concentration reading at the dinner at 8:20, a reading of 2233, that is to say 2,233 whatevers. I don't know what the unit is. Janskis. I've got a reading over 2,000 Janskis. Not the correct units, of course, but whatever this reading is over 5.5 times higher than normal outdoor levels and is a sign of very poor ventilation. They should have added more air disinfection at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and they didn't, and now everybody has got the COVID. So we'll see how many more people report in over the next couple of days. But every major news organization and now big name celebrity type people are in the crosshairs, and we'll see whether anything comes of that. Let's see. I mentioned to Greg, and I don't think we made mention of it during the show, but rather just during the break. But something else to keep an eye on. In the wake of the leaked Roe opinion, which may or may not be, the finalized opinion, et cetera, all the warnings that go along with that, it's all correct to say, as we discussed extensively yesterday in our political science discussion of things, Political Science Theater 3000 discussion, it's all correct to say that to the extent that Alito's reasoning is actually reasoning and not just whatever I say goes, then it is entirely possible that, logically speaking, the things that he is seeking with his opinion to purge from the body of precedent, Supreme Court precedent, would also leave the door open to the attack and possible elimination, logically speaking, right? Precedentially and logically speaking, the getting rid of every privacy-based right that exists in the country. And, I don't know. I don't know how much time I want to put in on it, but it's true that it all sort of stems from the Griswold case. And I know it's a name. Armando spent some time on Twitter yesterday pointing out nobody knows Griswold, but okay. So Connecticut people apparently do know Griswold, or at least Connecticut people of a certain age, Greg would point out. But they all recognize the right to privacy as an important thing. Whether or not people really recognize, it doesn't connect in a lot of people's minds. What do you mean the right to marriage rights are connected to the right to privacy? There's nothing private per se about marriage. It's a public declaration. But the right to choose to marry and have a relationship with anybody you want is, I guess, it's derived from the idea that privacy rights, A, exist, and B, afford you the right to make those sorts of individual choices without interference from the state. Contraception, that was a little more directly recognizable as a privacy thing because when it's used, it's generally used in a private setting. But yes, since then they have derived a whole host of additional rights from it, and they all stem from this Griswold decision. And theoretically, they could then attack that. So whether all the things that we've mentioned in going over this, contraception, marriage rights, whether interracial or same-sex marriage rights, LGBTQ rights in general, with or without a marriage involved, all these things derived from Griswold. All these things, logically speaking, would be under attack. Now, the next phase of the question becomes, as we see, various conservative-type pundits with, I think, a vested interest in not riling whatever passes for the liberal base and not riling the kinds of people who will come out and give $12 million in a single day's fundraising haul because they're worried about the future. And honestly, $12 million, not even really all that great. It's great to have it. $12 million is nothing to sneeze at. But I think, if I recall correctly, you could frequently have Donald Trump freaking his base out and raising $20 million in a day. But $12 million is something, and it's good, and it's whatever. We'll take it. But anyway, all of this is true. The Republican and conservative pundits will have a vested interest in not agreeing that all these things are under attack, either because, one, they don't want them to be under attack because they enjoy some of these privacy rights themselves, or two, they just don't want Democrats to find an issue to latch onto that'll give them a chance at not losing the midterm elections and or the 2024 presidential election. But there's also good reason to believe that they know very well that the decision in the elite, in Alito's opinion, is because it's more or less without basis, really, and because they've arrived at the place where conservative justices are simply saying, we're going to do what we want to do, and it doesn't really matter whether it follows logically or not. There's every reason to believe that, for instance, if they find, as we discussed yesterday, that there are consequences that they fear from carrying this through to its logical ends and invalidating the right to marriage, the right to contraception, et cetera, all the things that grow from the privacy right findings. If they find that there are consequences they want to avoid, they could avoid them. The fact that, pure logic leads inexorably to the invalidation of these other important rights doesn't mean that they'll go and do that. Remember, there's a couple of things happening here. One, logic itself is not self-executing. Just because the logic underpinning abortion rights is destroyed doesn't mean that even though that same logic underpins marriage rights, that by itself the magic of logic erases marriage rights. You have to, of course, bring a case to the court. It has to make it all the way to the court, and the court has to make the decision. Yes, this logic obtains, and so therefore we will go ahead and follow the logic where it leads and invalidate various marriage rights or rights to other things that stem from the privacy right. They would have to go ahead and actually bring that case, accept the case at the Supreme Court, and agree, yes, we want to destroy them based on this. Not that they couldn't, or not that they wouldn't, or not. There are plenty of people who believe that Republicans, in fact, want to do that. Plenty of people who believe that they just want to be able to say that they want to. Whatever. But the fact that the logical conclusion now exists doesn't do it by itself. Secondly, there's also this. Suppose somebody does bring the case, and they do bring it, and the Supreme Court does accept it, and they do agree that marriage rights depend on privacy rights, and the privacy rights have been invalidated by our decision in the abortion case. They can still say, if they want to, that was the point of yesterday's discussion, that nonetheless, despite the logic being undeniable, we will deny it. We'll simply say, somehow, if they want to say anything at all, it's I can't quite put my finger on it, but marriage rights are different from abortion rights. And so, although the logic would dictate that we would destroy the marriage rights as well, we're just not gonna, whether it's because we're afraid of the consequences, or we really think there's a distinction, or we don't really think there's a distinction, we just want to avoid it for whatever reason. Here I am avoiding it. 5 of us agree that we should avoid it, and it will be avoided. So that has to be kept in mind. But the other thing to keep your eye on is that now conservatives, we all think that this is emboldening conservatives about something, right? What if it emboldens them about something completely different? What if the takeaway is, well, the justices, we finally have at least 5 justices willing to do what they want to do, no matter what, whether there's reasoning for it or not. And for whatever reason, we've decided that marriage rights and contraception rights and a few other things just don't interest us, or at least not enough of us that we're going to go against those first. What about the discovery that the Supreme Court will, if presented with the opportunity, do whatever conservatives have on their wish list? What if we don't follow the logic? What if we don't follow the path and we don't expand on the rejection of the privacy right that underlies abortion, but instead go after something completely different and give the court the opportunity to be totally gimmitarian about something else entirely? So we switch our view now to Texas, where, let's see, I think I grabbed the tweet from the, must be the Austin Statesman. Is that the American Statesman? I don't know. Anyway, down in Texas, The paper has written this up, and the tweet sums up what's in the longer article, but maybe we want to take a look at the longer article and see if there's anything else to tease out of there. Abbott, that's Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said on Wednesday that Texas would consider challenging a 1982 Supreme Court decision requiring states to offer free public education to all children, specifically in the at issue in the case, including those of undocumented immigrants. But remember that at the heart of the case is the decision that the states have to offer free public education to all children, and all means including those who are the children of undocumented immigrants. But they might go after the entire decision. Well, that part where you said we have to provide it to all students, what if we could get away with claiming that really the Constitution says we don't have to provide it to anyone at all? Or you could just say, I want to eliminate it depends on what consequences you're willing to face here. Maybe you're only willing to face stripping those rights for the children of undocumented immigrants. Or maybe after years and years and years of attack on public education and the continuing attack led by Chris Rufo on public education, maybe you just say public education is something we've always kind of wanted to get rid of. Getting rid of it for undocumented immigrants or preventing or prohibiting offering that benefit to undocumented immigrants just seems like a nice chip we could break off. We're generally opposed to public education overall, but it has wide support now. We'll be swimming against the tide, but maybe we could at least separate out undocumented immigrants because we've whipped up, the frenzy about them on the immigration front. Why don't we punish them on the education front while we're at it? So anyway, we're not sure exactly what they're looking to undermine, the whole thing or just part of it, but it doesn't follow from the Roe decision logically, according to, what precedents and precepts are being tested in the abortion case, except if the precept you're really testing is 100% total, complete, free-for-all gimmitarianism. The court declares open season on logic and precedent. Whatever it is that was on your wish list, we'll now do it. We find that we have the power to do this, so bring whatever you got. So let's take a look at the article on it and see what they have to go with. And this opening up the article reminds us that it is, in fact, the Austin American Statesman. I don't know what country you thought those statesmen were from, but Texas is on the border. They could be Mexican statesmen, but not in this case. All right, let's see. Abbott says Texas could, quote, resurrect SCOTUS case requiring states to educate all kids. Now, here's a fun turn of events. The article is written by Nikki Griswold, who I think wrote something for the Statesman that we read the other day. It rings familiar, but the fact that she's a Griswold is just that much more interesting since that's what we were just talking about. Governor Greg Abbott said Wednesday that Texas would consider challenging a 1982 Supreme Court decision requiring states to offer free public education to all children, including those of undocumented immigrants. Texas already long ago sued the federal government about having to incur the costs of the education program in a case called Plyler versus Doe, Abbott said, speaking during an appearance on the Joe Pags Show, a conservative radio talk show. Okay, whatever. And the Supreme Court ruled against us on the issue. I think we will resurrect that case and challenge the issue again because the expenses are extraordinary and the times are different than when Plyler versus Doe was issued many decades ago. Of course, what he actually means by that is the court is different. There are 5, 6, whatever, arch conservatives on there that might just be willing to go full gimmitarian on this law because why the hell not? So let's give it a shot. The remarks came days after a leaked draft of a forthcoming U.S. Supreme Court opinion revealed that a minority of justices are poised, majority, I don't know how that would have worked otherwise, majority of justices are poised to revoke Roe v. Wade. Revoke is the wrong word here, but that's what they have. The landmark case establishing the right to abortion. Although the court has yet to officially issue a ruling in the case, civil rights advocates have raised concerns that the court's conservative majority might be amenable to attempts to overturn established precedent, including those related to LGBTQ rights and interracial marriage. But of course, those are based on the logic of overturning privacy rights in general. This broader piece here should be alleging, if it's not alleging it explicitly, to use that word which has been misused lately to make people think that there's something X-rated about it. But you are getting screwed, so there is something a little bit X-rated about this. But yeah, just overturn anything. This case, if it stands as much for the precept that this court is rejecting recently created privacy rights, but it also stands for the precedent that precedent doesn't matter, which is odd and unusual, and that you can take the long-time conservative wish list and just convert it into wins simply by snapping your fingers and getting 4 people to snap along with you so that there's 5. Abbott raised the possibility of challenging the ruling on education during a discussion about border security after Pagliarulo, which I guess is the Joe Pags guy's actual name, and because that's too foreign sounding for Texas, I guess, so he's now Joe Pags. After this guy asked whether the state could take steps to reduce the, quote, burden of educating the children of undocumented migrants living in Texas. Here's the exchange in full. Let's see. Joe Pagliarulo, says, we're talking about public tax dollars, public property tax dollars going to fund these schools to teach children who are 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, who don't even have remedial English skills. This is a real burden on communities. What can you do about that? And by the way, if you can't do anything about that, what about if I change the subject and say they're teaching them to hate America because CRT plus drag queens or something, like that? Oh yeah, well, whichever riles you up the most. Right now, immigration works pretty well in Texas. Well, the answer from Governor Abbott here is the challenges put on our public systems is extraordinary. That's one of the challenges was, of course, to teach you in public school that they are extraordinary, not is extraordinary, but okay. Texas already long ago sued the federal government about having to incur the cost of the education program in a case called Plyler versus Doe, and the Supreme Court ruled against us on the issue about denying, or let's say Texas having to bear that burden. I think we will resurrect that case and challenge this issue again because the expenses are extraordinary and the times are different than when Plyler versus Doe was issued many decades ago. So they already said that. This is just, I guess, poorly constructed. I was hoping that the fact that they were just repeating the same quote over again, except telling you that that was the full exchange, meant that they were going to expand on it further and talk about how the two cases are related, which they aren't, except insofar as they're both about gimmitarianism. But they didn't do that. That's the actual end of the article. So, I don't know. Not a great job doing the reporting there or connecting the dots, or maybe they did do a great job connecting the dots, Nikki Griswold, and the editors said, no, you're speculating, you're going too far out on a limb, we're going to chop the end of your article and just end it here, and she had to go along with that. But anyway, that's the thing I think you ought to keep an eye on. Not that you should ignore what everyone else is saying, and it's raising a lot of money to say that these other privacy-based rights are in jeopardy, and they are, and it's incorrect to say that they're not because logic, and that's the way up to now we've thought the court has worked. But a far more important thing, I think, to point out is that this could go anywhere. This is like one of those weird cancers that could metastasize anywhere in the body, not necessarily in the neighboring organ or whatever. I don't know enough about oncology to know how cancer spreads that way, but I certainly know that there are certain wild card cancers that can be, can manifest anywhere, and this is one that you should look out for. All right, time now for our third break. I guess we gobbled up that third segment on, I think that's extraordinarily important news, as evidenced by the fact that I did gobble up the entire segment. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but I know which is coming last, and that is the music that tells us that it's time to end the segment and jump back out. All right, let's see. There are definitely a few other items up for consideration here in the grab bag. Plus, of course, I've been waiting, and maybe I'll wait until Friday, as I was thinking of using Darwin's latest contribution to help eat up some time. But Friday is a day that I could really use the break, because we did have the benefit of having Greg with us for the first hour. Well, all right, we'll be right back with more after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, sorry about that. Somehow late. Getting ready to prepare the tweet. I sometimes want to be tweeting about the things that we're talking about on the show, so that we can get reaction while the show is still going. All right, so let's see. Just thinking about the Texas case and trying to bring up the argument, but it's hard to fit into one tweet, too, and I probably just should have waited until I had more time to craft that thing. Okay, let's see. Other things to bring to your attention. Let's see. I was thinking maybe it might be wise to double back and give a look to the story that Greg brought up yesterday about what went on at DHS, because I kind of feel like I didn't grasp exactly the import of what he was talking about, and I kind of wanted to double back on that one. I wish I had had it click for me while he was on the air, and we could have yesterday, and we could have talked more about it. This is the article that he brought forward from CNN. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, watchdog says Trump's agency appeared to have altered a report on Russian interference in the 2020 election, in part because of politics. And I mean, it jumped out as important, but then for some reason, I don't know, I just wasn't grasping the narrative of it here. And I wanted to double back. Priscilla Alvarez and Zachary Cohen reported it for CNN, and Greg brought it to us yesterday. Now let's run through the text of the article here. Former President Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security delayed and altered an intelligence report related to Russian interference in the 2020 election, making changes that, quote, appear to be based in part on political considerations, according to a newly released watchdog report. The April 26th Homeland Security Inspector General's assessment provides a damning look, damn, that look is damning, at the way DHS's Office of Intelligence and Analysis dealt with intelligence related to Russia's efforts to interfere in the U.S., stating that the department had deviated from its standard procedures in modifying assessments related to Moscow's targeting of the 2020 presidential election. Never mind the 2016 stuff, but essentially, Trump spent his entire term in office trying to insist that Russian interference in American elections was a hoax, the Russia hoax, and all fake and yada yada, blah blah blah. And then when the intelligence community concluded in 2016, no, not a hoax, real. And they just said hoax and not real anyway. Then the intelligence community found, same thing happening in 2020. All right, well here, we're in office and we have the ability to do more to help ourselves by altering things along the way, altering the evidence that tends to show that there is ongoing interference in the 2020 election, such that we can continue to call it a hoax and have people say, oh yeah, what's your proof? And the proof is proof that we manufactured, or proof to the contrary that we altered so that there wouldn't be evidence against us later on. And here, of course, the problem with altering evidence so that there's no evidence against you is that there is a path left behind of breadcrumbs to show that you were doing the alterations, which tends to prove that you were of guilty mind, guilty conscience the whole time anyway, plus you breach all sorts of protocols that are supposed to have consequences, but so far have never had consequences, etc., etc. All right, let's see. Where were we with the story? The conclusion that Trump's appointee appeared to have tried to downplay Russian meddling in a key intelligence report is the latest example of how his aides managed his aversion to any information about how Russia might be helping his election prospects. According to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, Trump officials tried to avoid the topic during meetings and at hearings because he would become enraged and upset when Russian meddling came up, because, of course, it tended to prove that he was guilty of exactly the thing that he said never happened, and that would have been a huge and unprecedented betrayal of America's trust heretofore invested in presidents and, in fact, candidates that stood for president. The sort of thing that, like along with everything else, you just thought couldn't happen, because if it ever did, the American public would become so outraged that the outrage would cross party lines and you'd be dragged from the White House and executed. But gosh, it just, we don't do that sort of thing. But we also thought that, if you stormed the Capitol and tried to take over and prevent the peaceful transfer of power, that you would be shot too. And only Ashley Babbitt got anything close to that. Everybody else is getting community service. Anyway, all right. So what do we learn? The connection to Mueller, I think, is kind of tenuous here so far. Mueller reported that whenever people brought up Russian interference from the 2016 election, Trump would get enraged about that. Doesn't really speak to the 2020 election so much. So, I don't know. Okay. The U.S. intelligence community announced during the 2020 campaign that Russia was actively meddling in the election to weaken then-candidate Joe Biden. At the time, Trump downplayed those findings and promoted false claims about Biden that aligned with Russia's disinformation efforts. Curiously enough, the IG report addresses past suspicions that Trump appointees distorted some intelligence reports to foster a more Trump-friendly narrative. So it's an ongoing thing. It's been happening for quite a while. The watchdog found, for example, that then acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf had participated in the review process multiple times despite lacking any formal role in reviewing the product, which caused delays and may have helped create the perception that assessments were changing for political reasons. Of course, people were perceiving that assessments were changing for political reasons because they were changing for political reasons. We determined that the acting secretary's involvement led to the rare occurrence of I&A, intelligence and assessment, is that I&A, ceasing dissemination of a product, that is to say a report of some kind, that's the product, after it had already been approved by the mission manager and circulated via advance notification, the report states. So here, in other words, high-ranking officials in the DHS were able to take a complete report that was basically being shown around and saying, we are going to announce this, and announce some part of it publicly and begin to circulate it in the government to prove our findings. And at that point, there's usually, I guess, nothing you can do about it once it reaches a certain stage, unless you're not afraid of consequences. Or if you believe, and you end up getting proved correct, that there are no consequences. There's no such thing as consequences, at least not in this administration or for Republicans in general. And so they take the unusual and unprecedented step of saying, even though this report has reached this critical point in the process where you can't stop it, we're going to stop it. No, but you can't. Why not? Because the rules say that you can't. And if you do, then there'll be evidence on the record that you've done this thing that's contrary to the rules. And then everyone will conclude that you broke the rules. The only reason you would break those rules, given that there's such dire consequences for breaking these rules, the only reason you could have decided to break them is because you were afraid that if the public found out what it said, you would be doomed. So you interfered, even though interference alone allows, let's say, a jury in a criminal trial to assume that you are guilty of breaking even bigger rules and even bigger norms. The fact that you broke the rules about when you intervened in the dissemination of this product can be taken as an inference that the reason that you interfered was because you feared public knowledge of what you had done on the substantive underlying issue being investigated in the first place. I know that's a lot of verbiage, but the theory is that you guys were accepting illegal electoral help from Russia in 2000, just as you did in 2016. We've investigated it, found it to be true, and we're about to put this report in the pipeline. And there are rules on the books that are designed to prevent administrations from politicizing intelligence and the findings of Inspector General reports, etc., that say that after a certain point, you're not allowed to interfere. And the penalty for interfering is that if we ever bring you to trial on it, we'll be able to tell the jury the very fact that they interfered at this point. If you believe the evidence we've brought forth that shows that the administration meddled with this report after this date, after this point in the process, then you're entitled, as the jury, from that finding of fact, to conclude that there was, in fact, an improper motivation here. You can assume motivation based on the action. Okay, but that still requires bringing people to trial on it. Like, you can do that at a trial, but what if there's no trial, for one thing? But more to the point, or more immediately here, you've got people like Chad Wolf, maybe at the direction of Donald Trump, or maybe just taking inspiration from Donald Trump's handling of various other things. Okay, so you're saying that there could be negative consequences of interfering after this point. What if I said, I don't believe you or I don't care, and I interfered at this point? Well, it'll be very dangerous because, well, what if nobody ever brings me to trial? Well, every indication is that they could. Well, but what if they just don't? Or what if they bring me to trial and I just say I can't recall a lot? Or what if I say I do recall and I'm totally guilty and I admit it, but we have one Trump MAGA lunatic on the jury and he refuses to convict, and it's, without unanimity, I walk. What about that? Could we work with that? Sure, I know it's a lot to gamble on, but yeah, we could do it. All right, so you're saying I'm really only in trouble if, 1, this gets reported, 2, people care about it, 3, people understand it, 4, they bring me to trial, and 5, we don't cheat at trial. Or 6, even if I lose at trial, Donald Trump doesn't run for president, win, and pardon me. Yes, that is what I'm saying. Oh, well, then in that case, interfere. But it's wrong. Are you ordering me to interfere? Yes, I am. You'll be covered. Well, we'll get pardons. Go and interfere. What if we don't? What if he doesn't win? Well, that's a lot of what ifs, because remember what country we're talking about here. It's the United States of America, and they don't like prosecuting people for stuff like this here. So go, interfere. So why not? So that's what they did. We determined that the acting secretary's involvement, acting led to the rare occurrence of INA ceasing dissemination of a product after it had already been approved by the mission manager. That's the point at which you're not allowed to interfere anymore, and circulated via advance notification, the report states. So it's a long gobbledygook way of saying the point of no return was passed, and they interfered anyway. And that is supposed to have dire consequences. That's me pounding my fist into my hand. So that's how you know how dire the consequences are. So far, the consequences have been a CNN report, which was read online to you on a podcast. That's the dire consequences to date. The delays and deviation from INA's standard process and requirements put INA at risk of creating a perception of politicization. That people could find on a jury that there had been politicization. So that's where we are. This conclusion is supported by INA's own tradecraft assessment, which determined that the product might have been viewed as politicized. It continues, the report stems from previous allegations of the Trump administration downplaying Russian interference. CNN first reported in September of 2020 a whistleblower complaint alleging that top political appointees in DHS repeatedly instructed career officials to modify intelligence assessments to suit Trump's agenda by downplaying Russia's efforts to interfere in the U.S. I feel like, duh, yes, we know that, and because it says we did. In September 2020, we knew that. It is now May of 2022, and we have advanced all the way to a podcaster angrily reading you a story from CNN. That's the extent of the official reaction so far. CNN has found out that some bureaucrats said if somebody wants to prosecute somebody, we could get a jury an instruction that would entitle them to find that, yes, there had been activity executed to politicize a report, and furthermore, that the fact that a report about Russian interference was the one we're talking about here, and that it was politicized, you can draw the conclusion that it was politicized in order to hide the guilt of Trump and his administration in all of this. But it only matters if there's charges. And it's been 2 years since we found out that charges are possible and you got a real shot at making them stick based on these assumptions you're allowed to make, but nobody has started the case. All right. The whistleblower claimed that Wolf had instructed DHS officials to cease providing intelligence assessments on the threat of Russian interference, and instead focused their efforts on gathering information to related activities being carried out by China and Iran. By the way, what are the results there? I don't know. The scope of the DHS IG report was limited to the single intelligence report in question. Initially, the IG found the DHS Intelligence and Analysis Office had followed internal drafting and editing processes. The report was 2 pages in length and related to one current Democratic presidential candidate and to Russian activities to influence the presidential election. It evolved over time after receiving internal input, according to the IG report. The IG also followed up on a July 2020 meeting mentioned by the whistleblower, who claimed Wolf had asked for the product to be held because, quote, it made the president look bad. So July of 2020, all the rules get thrown out the window. Don't bring that report forward because it makes the president look bad. Holy cow, that's wrong. This is July, then August, September. 2 months later, all right, that does it. I'm filing a whistleblower report. And that will bring the whole thing crashing down. And about 2 years later, we are reading angrily about it. According to notes of the meeting obtained by the IG, one top official wrote, AS1, whatever that is, will hurt POTUS. I guess that's the analysis something synthesis. I don't know what AS stands for. Will hurt POTUS. Kill it per his authorities. The official told the IG the notes meant the AS, acting secretary. That's interesting. Had told him to hold the product because it would hurt Trump, and the authorities cited were in reference to those possessed by the secretary. The IG's office interviewed Wolf, who denied saying this and added that he had asked for the product to be improved. I tried to put myself in the position of one of our state and local partners who would be reading this, and I could not see where the product, as written on July 8th, would have added any value or given them any knowledge they could use. The product was not well written, the acting secretary told the IG's office, according to the report. And so, yeah, he says, I wasn't politicizing it. I was just saying that it was unhelpful and needed to be rewritten, but in totally permissible ways. Oh, because the note here says you got to kill it because it's going to hurt the POTUS. Oh, I didn't say that, or at least I don't recall saying that. The delays and disruptions, though, put the office at risk of creating the perception of politicization, the IG report states. The IG recommended working with the Office of the Secretary and the I&A oversight entities to make sure election-related reports are in line with policies and guidelines. I&A agreed with the recommendation. So they bureaucrated this thing to death. And, there'll be no trial on it or anything. But if there was, it would be a total humdinger. That's the good news. All right, well, there we have it. That's of some interest. I guess we'll also add this to the pile. Washington Post reporting from the legal front. Trump organizations, which ones, I wonder, agreed to pay $750,000. 750,000 smackaroos, the entirety of the Trump fortune, to settle a lawsuit with the District of Columbia. The city alleges that these groups, these Trump organizations, whatever they may be, misused nonprofit funds. What? How could that happen? They've only been guilty of that once or twice before. But which nonprofit? Well, as it turns out, the Inauguration Committee is the nonprofit we're talking about here. They misused nonprofit funds donated for inauguration to benefit Trump and his family. And you remember that from less than day one, day zero, day -10, whatever it was, I was saying, eventually we'll learn, I was very specific about it, eventually we'll learn that the inaugural committee paid Trump and his family appearance fees to show up at their own inauguration. Though this is the rough equivalent of it. I was exaggerating. The most ridiculous thing I could possibly think of for justifying the payments would be, I'm a celebrity, I get appearance fees when I show up at things, including my own inauguration. But the real aim, of course, was to take money that was donated for inauguration and find ways of funneling it to the pockets of the Trump family. Appearance fees actually would have been, much more up and up, straightforward and honest than the ways that they did it. But as they said, as we say in political science, they feared the consequences of it getting out that you paid yourself an appearance fee, acting like a prima donna Hollywood celebrity, which was, of course, the target of so much derision and part of their campaign. So instead, I need you to find a different way of funneling that money to me personally. They found it. They did it. D.C. found it. They sued. And here's where we are. Keith Alexander writing for the Washington Post. The Trump Organization, the big company and everything, and former President Donald Trump's Presidential Inaugural Committee, both. Those are the two Trump, Trump organizations agreed to pay. One was the Trump Organization, the name of his network of companies, real estate companies, etc., and the Inaugural Committee. Both are in the wrong here, and both agreed to pay the District of Columbia $750,000 smackaroonies. Wow. Should have been much more, but that's the settlement. To settle this suit that the city filed alleging that the organizations misused nonprofit funds to benefit the former president and his family, while, of course, he was still president, I would add. The city's Office of the Attorney General filed a lawsuit in 2020, again, way back in 2020, when they could have filed suit about the Inspector General report over in DHS, but didn't. But since they don't control the Office of the Attorney General of D.C. from the White House, they went ahead and filed the lawsuit in D.C. Superior Court, alleging the Inaugural Committee, a nonprofit corporation, coordinated with Trump's family to overpay for event space in the Trump International Hotel in downtown Washington, and even paid for space on days when it did not hold events. I think we already knew most of this, but remember that this was the basic play for graft all along, that the idea would be to steer money to the Trump family. And also remember that in the campaign phase of things, right, the big promise to Trump supporters and Trump believers was, I'm rich and wealthy, and I'm so rich and wealthy, it's a good thing, not because I'll steal money from the government, but because I will save the government money. Like, we'll have big-time conferences like the G20 or the G7, and I'll try to turn back into the G8 by bringing Russia in. And we'll hold them at Trump properties, and the whole big hook here was, normally the federal government has to pay millions of dollars in order to stage an event at one of these venues. But because I own the venue, the federal government will save those millions of dollars because I'll just give him the space for free, he campaigned on. But what he really meant was, no, I won't. That's a total lie. I will simply spend not just the same amount of money, but more money. I will actually charge more than other venues normally charge. And I will charge that money, and I will take the federal government money and launder it into personal funds. Because why wouldn't I? It's a chance to launder money into personal funds. Here, though, he's stealing not state money, not federal government money for a federal government event, but stealing nonprofit money donated to the inaugural campaign, and an even more favorable play. Now, of course, normally he's just converting campaign dollars into personal dollars. He doesn't care what kind of dollars they are, really, that he converts, just so long as he converts them. But in the case of the inaugural committee, because that's actually considered to be a non-political event, which is crazy, and something we should change, those donations are tax deductible. And I guess back in the day when it was just about, going through the pageantry of inaugurating a president, it was permissible to consider this to be a non-political event, and a corporate entity might want to give millions of dollars to it because, hey, it's a historical event. Where that's all. It doesn't elect anybody after all. But of course it adds to the prestige of the newly elected president, who's then setting up eventually to run for re-election later. It's just a bad decision, but it's one we've had for a while. So here they're stealing the tax-deductible corporate and private donations made to the inaugural committee and stealing those. It's not stealing out of government coffers, but it is stealing a government subsidy of non-taxation. Anyway, lawyers for the district also accused Trump's organization of improperly using nonprofit funds to throw a private party on January 20th, Inauguration Day, for Trump's children, Ivanka, Donald Jr., and Eric, which cost $300,000. Now, reminder, none of them are being inaugurated president, but they get their own separate party because, why not? I can steal $300,000 for a big party. You want a party? You guys love parties. Let's do it. The city also alleged that the Trump Organization, the inaugural committee, and the Trump International Hotel misused $1.1 million. D.C. Attorney General Karl Racine said the settlement enables the city to claw back money that Trump's inaugural committee misused. After he was elected, one of the first actions Donald Trump took was illegally using his own inauguration to enrich his family, Racine said in a statement. We refuse to let that corruption stand. No one is above the law, not even the president. Nonprofit funds cannot be used to line the pockets of individuals, no matter how powerful they are. Now, any future presidential inaugural committees are on notice that they will not get away with such egregious actions. But, of course, they misused $1.1 million. So you should be getting $1.1 million with interest, but instead you're getting $750,000 because it's a settlement. If they had gone to trial, could they have won all $1.1 million? Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows. But they took $750,000 to avoid the trouble of going through the trial. Because why? Because they've been waiting since 2020 to get this thing done. Nonprofits such as Trump's committee cannot use funds to give private benefits to its leaders. Trump was not formally an officer of the inaugural committee, but Racine has asserted that for the purposes of the lawsuit, Trump and his family should still be treated as its leaders because they exercised control off the books. Lee Blaylock, counsel for the inaugural committee, in a statement described the Attorney General's claims as baseless and said the group settled to avoid litigation costs, which would have been covered by its insurance company, but could have exceeded the agreed-upon settlement amount. Blaylock added that if the case had gone to trial, the organization would have prevailed based on the evidence. But because we were so sure of it, we gave you $750,000 instead. Right, whatever. Racine's office identified 2 D.C. nonprofit youth oriented organizations, Mikvah Challenge DC and DC Action. Those are going to be the beneficiaries of the settlement. Each will receive $375,000 of that settlement. Doesn't go to the D.C. government except as a pass-through, it turns out. Kimberly Perry, executive director of D.C. Action, said the 30-year-old child advocacy organization plans to use the funds to continue various initiatives for D.C. youths on education, health, and economic security. That's nice. Mikvah Challenge, which has been in the district since 2015 and part of a national organization, trains D.C. youths on civic leadership and democracy. Is it named for Abner Mikvah, maybe? I don't know. It also provides summer jobs for school-age youths to work with D.C. political leaders such as the City Council, Attorney General's office, and the Mayor's office. On May 17th, the organization will hold a mayoral debate regarding issues affecting D.C. youths. Isn't that nice? In the city's lawsuit, attorneys asserted that the Trump Organization and the inaugural committee paid vastly inflated prices to the hotel, even after senior committee staff and members of the Trump family were warned that the charges were unreasonable. So just to sort of cap this whole thing, not only did they not give away venues for free, not only did they charge for them anyway, they charged inflated prices because, after all, they're the ones who get to set the prices. And they're at both ends of this transaction. I'm both the people, I'm in charge of the committee renting the ballroom, and I'm in charge of setting the price for the ballroom. That self-dealing has been illegal since forever.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Just wanted to point out that self-dealing rears its ugly head again. Now rearing its fantastically attractive head, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam bringing up these issues and more, no doubt, in a big roundup, as always, of an esoteric collection of news from around the country and around the world. Stay tuned, and we'll see you tomorrow.